This is the Ozark Trail Outdoor Walkie-Talkies, the OZA-19 LT001, frequently bought at Walmart in the camping aisle. The water resistant rating is of an IPX4. Also, it can take splashes of water, quote unquote. Like any other electronic, attempt to not get it wet. It is in your best interest. Like any other FRS radio, it has a fixed antenna, meaning you cannot remove the antenna. The antenna is stuck there and it is not able to move and still work properly. That being said, here is the front-facing panel of it. Right here, you have the call and power on button, the lock and menu button, the monitor and the scan button, the lamp, as well as the weather channel button, the volume, the channel, and the push to talk, which is what makes the radio talk. Measuring the radio, you get roughly 5 5/8 inches. That is including the antenna, as the antenna does not come off. This radio, like any other FRS radio, operates on the Family Radio Service / GMRS radio service. So it operates on channels 1, 462.562, all the way up to 22, 462.725. Meaning this radio can talk to this radio, being the UV5G. It is able to talk to it, which I will show you here in a second. Turning on the radio is very simple. You just hold on the power button. As you see, I already had it set to 16. It has a green backlight, this showing your channels, and this showing what tone you have. Unfortunately, it does not show the CT CSS that it is. Instead, they just call it tone 1, tone 2, all the way up to 121, as this radio has 121 privacy tones. If you were to hold on to this button, it would power it back off. Or if you were to simply press it, it puts out the annoying call. Most people will not appreciate whenever you use that unless you are with a group of friends who specifically say that that is what they want you to do. Pressing and holding this button will lock it. Cannot change anything, but you can still transmit. So to take that back off, you just hold it. Going into the menu, you can change the privacy tones or the CT CSS tones. 0 would be no tones, while 1 is 67 hertz. I'm going to go ahead and put that back down to 0. If you press menu again, it shows CA, meaning call. You can change what call you transmit over the air. So, if I was to click this again, and that's all of the calls. Obviously, as you saw, if you have it set to 0, you will not transmit a call. If you see Vox, as any other radio, Vox is, if you set it, you do not have to press the push to talk button in order to transmit. You will simply just talk loud enough and it will pick it up, as it just did on my other radios. To turn that back off, you simply change it back to 0. It goes from 1 to 3 in the order of least sensitive to most sensitive. Now this radio also has a 2-channel monitoring feature. It says OF for off, but if I wanted, I could have it set to monitor set channel 3. At the same time. That way, I could monitor channel 3 and channel 1 at the same time, assuming you're in a group of friends and you're using 2 separate channels, or if you just want to hear somebody on channel 16 and 20, whether or not they have repeaters in the area set up for GMRS and that you're still picking it up. And that is all of the menu options. Now, a single press of the monitor and scan button causes it to scan. Untapping it will take you back to the last channel that you are on. Now, when you are scanning, that does not mean that you are going to be able to hit the push to talk button and jump to the channel that you scanned on. Unfortunately, it takes you right back to the channels that you were just on. Now, if you were to push and hold the monitor button, it opens up the squelch to 0. That way you can hear any oncoming traffic, whether or not they're breaking the squelch. A single press of this would turn on the lamp. It is not extremely handy, but it is useful enough if you are reading a book at night. A long press of this turns on the weather channels. It already has the pre-built NOAA weather channels in the radio itself. And as you saw earlier, pushing the channels up and down changes it, but it is still second channel monitoring 3. That way, if at any point I get a receiving on 3, it will let me know. And once again, this is the push to talk button. Now, as you see, I have this radio set to GMRS1, which is also FRS1, and this one also set to 1. So if I was to push to talk, I would be hearing that on there. Similarly, testing, I would be picking it up on there. Now, unfortunately, this does have a built-in Roger beep, and you cannot turn it off. So if this annoys you, you're going to have a rough time. If it doesn't annoy you and your friends, then you're fine. So how much is your Ozark Trail radio going to cost you? Well, I've got mine on a sale from Walmart for $20. Now, as a general rule, they are $26. They come in a 2-pack, and they are already programmed to have it set up in the same channels that you already saw, channels 1 to 22. That being said, I find them extremely durable. I've dropped them many a times. It's not too scratched up, has a little bit of wear on it, but nothing too terribly bad. I find them to be fairly consistent and have a consistent power output. That being said, it has a power output of only half a watt, although the FRS maximum is 2 watts and the GMRS maximum is 5 watts. This pushes out 5 watts nearly all the time, from what I can tell. It has a little bit of trouble getting over hills like any other FRS or GMRS radio does, and is purely based on line of sight. If you're expecting to get any more than a mile out of them, you're being silly. But if it's just you and your friends out on a hiking trail and you want to explore just a little bit, then you can still talk to each other. Or if you and your friends are working on a project and need to communicate each other and don't have time to pull out your phone, dial up the number, and call them every time, then this still works perfectly fine. as it can communicate with a bunch of other radios and has the tones pre-built into it to also hear and talk to them. Would I recommend this radio? Well, it depends on what your needs are. If you and your friends are hiking and you're not going very far from each other, I'd say it's perfectly fine and acceptable. If you need a slightly more power output, I would recommend getting something that pushes out 4 to 5 watts. Or switching over to a different radio service, such as MERS, where it can push through leaves and such a little bit better than these radios can. That being said, for the purposes that I have talked about, they're perfectly fine and acceptable. I would rate it probably a 7 or 8 out of 10. It is perfectly fine for what it is used for.